All right, Fred, so glad to have you on the Liberty Ventures podcast here, especially since we've known each other for over almost a decade now, since
Yeah.
I started at Conscious Capitalism back in the day, which is where we met. And we were kind of just talking about this beforehand, but I want to begin by just asking for you to share your reflections on being a conscious capitalist and the evolution of how you thought about this coming up through that movement, running so many businesses yourself over the years, and just where you've come to with everything at this point.
Yeah, I think I got introduced to conscious capitalism about 15 years ago when I went to my first event in San Diego. I met Raj, I met John Mackey, and some of the other people who are still involved with it, and others that you know very well. And my story's probably similar to several people that I've talked to. They sort of showed up and they listened to people that are talking. They said, "Oh my God, this is my tribe. Where have you been?" It's kind of like the ugly duckling. You don't fit in with the ducks. You're a swan, and here we are. We're a swan, and that's what it was like, and that allowed me to really get a codified approach to conscious capitalism. My philosophies were already aligned, but the framework that John and Raj did in the original book really gave me the foundation to be able to share with other people. Read this book, and my work involves working with founders and CEOs. And I always bring this into the conversation. I love the stakeholder model. In fact, yesterday, I had a conversation with the team that I'm now leading, and I shared the stakeholder model and why that's so important. And people, you could really see it resonate with them because everybody wins. It's not I win at the expense of you, or vice versa. Someone wins at the expense of oneself. We don't want that. And so that journey allowed me to use that framework. It allowed me to invite dozens of leaders to come join me at the various events that Conscious Capitalism and now Liberty Ventures is offering, and with great success. People are very grateful for that because it can be transformative if you allow yourself to be willing to learn. I'm an intellectually curious person, so I'm always open to a new idea. I don't get upset if I don't know something. I get excited. Oh, I got something new to learn. Other people like to hide that, especially CEOs. They got to know all the answers. But I think the network you have built that you started at Conscious Capitalism is a very, very generous network. Everyone's always willing to help each other. And that's one of the things that I really value the most about this on the journey.
I appreciate that. And I think you're really one of the models for what it means to be a giver in a network and to be a conscious leader. And I mean, one of the things that I do want to emphasize more this year within the Liberty Ventures Network, as we were talking about, is getting our members to think about their personal leadership and both who they really are and how they present themselves in the way they do business. And you really are just an incredible model on this and have thought a lot about it. So let's double click on just how you think about effective business leadership these days, Fred.
Well, I mean, really, it always fundamentally starts with oneself. And I also, other models that I use, like emotional intelligence. The very first dimension of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And I always tell people when I speak to them, if anyone ever tells you they're self-aware, big clue, they're not. Because if you've ever attempted to be self-aware, you're humbled immediately at how difficult it is to be present in the present moment, have the mindfulness to be available to yourself now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, right now. There's a great expression that says the universe is neutral. And there's a quote of Hamlet says, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And the reason I bring that up is that when you start trying to be more self-aware and you see things that occur in your life, they unfold in front of you. When I'm unconscious, I will immediately grab that rope and go down the rabbit hole of that emotion that sort of got triggered in me. Over time, I've tried to learn to step back and take a millisecond to pause and say, what choice do I wish to make? I have an urge to go this way. Is that urge going to be helpful to me or not? If not, I have a choice I can make in a different direction to act in a better way. That is the foundation, I believe, of leadership, is to lead oneself. From there, you go into the other dimensions of, okay, I have to lead a team. I want them to do a certain thing. I want them to perform. I want them to achieve certain results. But if you want to affect their behavior, it starts with you controlling your own behavior. So the self-awareness, the self-management, social awareness, and then relationship management, which is the outcome of all that hard work. So it always starts with you. And that's where you get humble about it. It's not about saying, look at me, I'm the boss, I'm the head. That's a role. Okay, that's a role. But what about you as a person? And the great leaders are the ones that are great people, and then people become loyal to the person, not just saluting to the role. And I think that's the big difference. Is it transactional, or is there something really deeper that goes on within that relationship?
And I love the way you just put that, because transactions aren't bad things. We need to have transactions. Business is all
Mhm.
transactions, but does it go deeper than that? Is there also a relationship underneath there? And are we thinking about not just the next transaction, but a lifetime of transactions, which is what relationships really are about?
Well, the criticism of capitalism, be it crony capitalism or the capitalism that destroys others, that the win-lose, is that it's only transactional. And the transaction is it benefits me, but not you. What's wonderful about having principles around this is that if you are considerate of another person, you are evoking empathy. And I think as a human being, we have three dimensions we operate from: our mind, our heart, and our gut. And all three should be present when you're making a decision, when you're making a choice, when you're leading a team. People who live from the neck up are skeptical. They're cynics, because it's all logic, and they don't evoke emotion. If you start leading with your heart as well, now you have two dimensions. You can get greater empathy to be considerate of other people. And your gut is that instinct of, is this safe? Is this something that would be good, and all that stuff? It's got its own brain, and we have a brain in our gut. That's been scientifically proven. And to me, a leader has this coherence between their mind, their heart, and their gut to be able to make decisions more effectively, not always in favor of oneself, because the stakeholder model says it favors everybody. And I think that's part of what we try and do.
So, so much of this does line up with a conscious capitalist framework, or what we're calling principal business now. But you said that this is just what you've always believed, Fred. How did you come to believe all this in the first place before even discovering these other movements and terms?
By screwing up. I just made a lot of mistakes. You find out, at least I found out quickly what works and what doesn't work. If I ever did anything that was self-serving, it just doesn't work. It might work short term, but not long term. And I remember I read Robert Greenleaf's book, Servant Leadership. That was sort of an inkling of, oh, wait a minute, and then I said, finally realized, oh, wait a minute, people report to me, but I must work for them. And if I make them strong, they'll support my career, so that when I make a mistake, they catch me and lift me back up. The other side is, if you're working just for yourself and your own self-aggrandizement, when you make the inevitable mistake you will fall, and people will watch you fall and say, enjoy the ride down. And we see this publicly all the time. I mean, look at how many of the mighty have fallen, right? We don't have to get to the specifics of people, but there's a lot of stuff that's come out in recent years, be it the Me Too movement, Epstein, so forth and so on, where people were just behaving badly and presenting a public persona that was artificial and false. It was not transparent. It was not based on truth and principle. And I believe that the alignment that we have to have is to align ourselves with universal, timeless principles, which a lot of principle leadership is that. Okay, swim with the current. Don't swim upstream, because you will crash and burn. And that's where the humility comes into, to realize I'm out of alignment. I'm not in shape. I need to do something different. And the great leadership, I think, is the ones that balance opposing forces. Do you want great labor? Do you want great, profitability? Do you want great service? Do you want, great labor again? There's this push and pull and push and pull in manufacturing and retail and restaurants and all that kind of stuff. And great leaders stand right in the middle. It's like two horses pulling at you, and you just sort of bob back and forth when you do that, because both balance is two sides of the same coin. You don't pick one over the other. You pick both, and you just figure out how to lean into it.
Book I read about 10 years ago when we met that has really touched me was something called Polarity Management, which
Hmm?
I'm just sure you've read too. And it's very really touching on the same thing, that
Right.
when you're thinking about taking care of your employees, taking care of your investors, taking care of your customers, your suppliers, or just anything that seems to be in
Right.
opposition to each other, you've got to balance them and find a way to get the best out of both sides and avoid
Right.
the negatives that come with each of them as well. That's what you
Exactly.
touched.
And it's interesting too, because I work with so many leaders, and one of the things I ask them, they kind of look at me like I'm crazy. I said, "Are you a nice leader, or are you a kind leader?" And they're like, "Well, isn't that the same thing?" I go, "Oh, no, 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 not at all. A nice leader is seeking validation and approval from everyone around them. So therefore, you won't confront them when they're not doing their job, because you want them to like you. A kind leader treats others with respect, but also holds them accountable, because there's a contract here. I am paying you to do a job, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that. I will always treat you with respect and dignity, but you will do your job. And nice leaders don't work. They don't work well. They are self-destructive. Kind leaders are the ones that earn loyalty and trust and respect, because people know that if you hold them accountable to a result, it's for their own good. It's not just for yourself. And I think that's part of the subtleties that we're trying to get into.
I completely agree with that. And that actually kind of bypasses the whole question of whether someone in life is a giver or a taker, which we were talking about before, but actually starts to integrate them and say, everyone needs to get something. Like, we need to eat, we need to have shelter and take care of ourselves. But the way to do that most effectively, even as Adam Smith articulated in The Wealth of Nations, is to
Sure.
look out for others and to provide them with more value and to put them first and know that we will be taken care of as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly givers are the ones that are reaching out and offering support to other people. And I think we can do this in mentorship for younger executives that need help, or peers to offer our assistance. And that feels good and is paying it forward. And it's got a lot of benefits to it. Takers are the ones that are just there transactionally. The takers are the transactional people who are only there trying to get something, and and those are the ones that are reading name tags at conferences and trying to say, oh, are you worth me talking to? And then if they think that you're not, they'll start looking over your shoulder and looking for someone that is worth talking to in their opinion, right? So those are the takers. And then there's another one, the people who are self-aware and self-confident enough to ask for help. Okay. And asking for help takes courage. That takes courage. And courage is a big, important quality in leadership. And the favorite definition I've heard for courage is it's not the absence of fear. It's the ability to carry out with dignity in spite of it. And part of the time is recognize one's own limitations and say, I really, Alexander, I'm sorry to bother you, but I really would appreciate your assistance in something I'm struggling with. Can I talk to you about that? That takes courage, to admit that you don't know something.
That that hits so hard, and Fred, I hope it's okay for me to bring up here that over the last few years, you've shown just such an incredible amount of courage as you've gone through your battle with cancer, which you've been public about. So I hope it's okay for me to bring up. And
Yeah, of
I've
course.
seen you go on this deep spiritual journey as a part of that as well. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit of that here with everyone listening.
Sure. I mean, I got diagnosed in 2020, right at the beginning of COVID. And my surgery was at the beginning of COVID. It was horrible to go into a hospital in that environment because everybody was terrified. And what was going to be an overnight procedure turned out to be 5 nights. No visitors, you just, kind of by yourself because no one wanted to come into anybody else's room. So getting someone to come in was tough enough. And I came through that. And I was told at the time I took a DNA test that the probability was like 92% would come back, and it did several years later. And so I had to go back at it again. Thankfully, not during COVID, and there's a lot of Western medicine, and you have to go through chemical castration and radiation. I didn't want to do it, but you have no choice. But I also decided to attack this. Maybe the wrong word is attack, but embrace it. I'm going to say embrace and say, my body got cancer. I didn't get cancer. So I need to work on my body eliminating cancer. And so while I did the Western practice of the medicine, the radiation, and all the stuff I didn't want to do, I just had no choice but to do it. I made the decision to do it, even though I went to a lot of medical clinics, because I also embraced the spiritual side. I started working with a woman who came up with a health plan for me, started focusing much more on meditation, my diet. I did 3 meditation retreats. I went to India for 2 weeks to visit temples at the request of a friend of mine who said, come to India. I'm going to take you to places to help you with your cancer. So I don't want to call it woo-woo because I don't think spirituality is necessarily woo-woo. But I didn't want to be like Steve Jobs drinking tea while he had liver cancer. I wanted to make sure I was aggressive on both sides. And I actually am grateful now that my body got cancer. And when people hear me say, they go, are you out of your mind? And I go, no, because I've had such incredible, beautiful experiences and the gifts of people who have given to me, because I was one of those guys who didn't ask for help all the time. And I had to finally ask for help. And it was a beautiful exchange. People felt so fulfilled that I asked them and I received it. And I was able to be grateful to them. In fact, they have a core group of people where I live in Charlotte that we formed the Healing Circle. And once a month, they would get on Zoom. At first, we did it in person, then on Zoom. And they spent an hour with me as I lay, and they would sort of meditate, and send energy my way. And that might sound woo-woo to some people, but this is something that's very common in many cultures. And at the end of it all, when I was ultimately declared cancer-free, my body was now cancer-free. And I was able to say, yes, I helped manifest this through all the things that I did. The way I paid them back is a chef friend of mine. I started an organization called Chefs Against Cancer. He lost his wife about 5 years ago to cancer. She was a beautiful woman. And he started this charity to help raise money for cancer. I took my entire group of friends that had done this for me. I bought a table, for a lot of money to help support the charity, to say, thank you for doing this. And we're now going to give to other people who need this help as well. And it was just a beautiful experience. And ironically, I met a man who's actually building a pond for me at this event. I go, what are you doing here? He goes, I lost my son to cancer 5 years ago. And I had no idea, and that's the kind of exchanges you have with people where you go, oh, wow, this is now serious. And the reason I was public is that in discussing this with my wife, because I'm private, I didn't want to share this, is I thought I could help other people. And I've had some profound conversations. In fact, today I had a conversation with a friend of mine. I had no idea he had prostate cancer until he heard that I had it. So he called me up. I haven't talked to him in like 5 years. And he said, I want to talk to you about this. And that is the gift, is to be able to help other people during this time of fear and anxiety and concern that is very normal to be human, and to disassociate your body's experience from your own personal experience. Years ago, I think it was Wayne Dyer said, I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And I believe that to be true. And that's part of what I've discovered on this journey.
I just so appreciate you being willing to share all of that. I think it does have tremendous implications for everyone who's going through that themselves. But even people who haven't had cancer, you think there's some big takeaways I'm even taking myself right now from how you present this for everything else in our lives. The fact that you didn't say it's either the Western or Eastern medicine. It was about using both. Again, polarity management there, getting the best of both of them instead of the worst, and not saying it's just one or the other. You being
Correct.
willing to share what you've learned with others to help them on their journey, and you realizing that this requires you to give it your all to get through. There's just so much to take away from that experience for everyone else, and that applies to so many parts of life.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's learning to overcome fear. I mean, I'll share with you, when I hired this woman to help me with my health journey, I said, I want you to help me get rid of the fear. Because to be honest with you, you're told you have cancer the first time, it's not great. The second time, it's even worse. And there's a tendency to crack, in 2 o'clock in the morning, you're looking at the ceiling, kind of the cracks in the ceiling going, oh my God, what am I going to do? I could die. I mean, and what I realized is that when you're faced with mortality, you really learn to live. And so she started helping me on eliminating the fear. And I ended up speaking to a man that I met through a Conscious Capitalism event, Bruce, if you remember him, Bruce Fetzer.
Yeah.
Okay, so I called him up and I told him everything I was doing. And he's very kind, very, very kind. This is a good example of receiving. And he said, Fred, you've done everything that you could possibly do. I'm very proud of you. However, you're pointing in the wrong direction. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you're focusing on eliminating fear, and I understand why logically that's true. He said, what you need to be doing is accepting love. It's everywhere. It's all around you. You just have to accept love. And I was thunderstruck when he said that. I mean, I just felt my heart crack open, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, he was right. I had to turn around. And instead of focusing on the thing that I didn't want, focus on that which I needed to receive, which was love. And that was transformative. I think it really accelerated my healing. And I have a pretty good idea of when I experienced, I call it the physical transformation of healing. When my body no longer had the cancer, it was now cancer free. After a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer, trips to India, radiation, all that stuff, there was a point where it finally flipped. And I was like, wow, this is it. And it was a very powerful emotion that I was going through. It was during a meditation. And I really am convinced that was the point when I finally got it. And it was not easy. It was not easy. Some people don't survive that. I'm blessed in that regard.
That is such a blessing. And I gotta say, you do a lot of turnarounds. You've helped a lot of companies go through their own journey of getting rid of the cancer from their companies themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. The
I feel like
toxicity.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the analogy is very direct here, and wondering if you've thought about how what you went through applies to the work that you're doing in helping companies in those situations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm in a new one right now. You know, I just started a week ago. And I had a chance. I believe that, you know, and I'm not the one who came up with this. I literally borrow from other people. But companies need to be both smart and healthy. And culture is the secret weapon. So while sometimes I find people are very, very smart, very intelligent, but they have no moral compass to eat their young. A company that's healthy, maybe not that smart, will figure it out because they got each other's back. And that's the important thing. And so I'm very clear on the working agreements I established with them about transparency, truth telling, and honesty. It is not acceptable. Friedrich Nietzsche has a great quote that says, "I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm more upset because I'll never be able to trust you again."
Mm.
And, you know, and it's a wonderful way of putting the accountability in the person. You made that choice. I didn't make the choice. I'm upset that you did that because now I can't trust you, but you made the choice to lie. And those are the kind of things, the toxicity, the false harmony, people in the room nodding their head. Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. To get up and walk out and go, that was bullshit. You know, and I see that all the time. And I've been around long enough where I can kind of pick up on it. You can tell when someone's just catering to you and pandering, telling you what you want to hear versus being truthful. And there's ways to discover and uncover that in them so they can see their own humanity, their own fear that's really being manifested by doing that. And they're just saying, that's not necessary anymore. You're safe. You're safe. You can be yourself. You can tell me if you don't agree. We can agree to disagree. You know, it's disagree and commit. You know, that came up from Alfred Sloan, who started GM, and Jeff Bezos picked it up. Disagree and commit. That's fine. But once you commit, you're in 100%. No neener, neener, neener if it didn't work. No, I told you so. But we're going to consider everyone's point of view in the decision. We're not going to manage by consensus. We're going to consider your point. And I want to hear from you. And if you ever work in an organization that's strictly top down, if you go to them, what do you think? They're like, oh, no, no, don't know. Just tell me what you're going to do because I know this game. You know, I tell you what I think, I'm going to get smacked. And you have to sort of teach them, no, that's not the case. And trust is so important. It's the foundation of all relationships. You know, you're recently married. Congratulations, soon to be a father. And trust always starts at maybe, not yes, not no, just maybe. And if you get conditional trust by acting with integrity, you may reach the point of unconditional trust. On the other hand, if you start doing things that are like taking out, you know, withdrawals from an emotional bank account, where you start getting more skepticism, mistrust, and ultimately potentially the worst level of mistrust is betrayal. You really betray someone. That's the issue. And these are the kind of things that a leader has to get involved in, the minutia of that to be able to lead an organization.
That is such a powerful way for us to end here. Fred, thank you so much for taking the time to share this with me and the rest of Liberty Ventures and just being this incredible conscious leader that you are. I'm so
Well,
excited
thank
for you
you.
to share this at the Executive Summit coming up in Atlanta, seeing what you present at the summit at Necker, and just everything that you're doing in the network to help other leaders out.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Alexander. And I'm so proud of what you've achieved so far since you started Liberty Ventures. Everyone should be grateful that you're given the opportunity to shine. So thank you.
Thank you, Fred.